Alright, hello, and welcome to the 21st episode on What If Civilization Started Over. And of course, I also have to welcome you to World War I, because in the last episode, we obviously saw the First World War begin to very quickly unfold. Now, I do also want to quickly point out, unlike in our world, which our war started in roughly 1914, this world's war happened way before ours, as this war started currently as we speak in 1783, and let me tell you, it is not going to shy short from a absolutely devastating war, because as we know, we have this main region over here. That's not what I wanted. Over here with alliances, and I think it's also safe to say that someone needs to join a certain alliance to solidify this being a full world war, because as we see, we officially have the Diamond Alliance being brought to Portugal over here. But we also see how badly Portugal is losing, but we'll get to that in a second. Because currently this is what all the fronts are looking like, but let me tell you, this is going to very quickly change, as we do see a separate country join a separate alliance, but this time it is not the Diamonds, as it is the Trapezoids, as currently it is currently a 3v2, so why don't we even it out with a 3v3, as we have, I guess, this is like North Spain, or I guess Northern Iberia. I don't know exactly the name of this region, but that doesn't matter, as what does matter is that they have officially joined this war on the side of the Romans and the French, and as we see, they will make some actually solid progress over here in this region, where they are going to successfully capture this northern major city over here, as well as push to try and reach the second one. And honestly, the Portuguese didn't fully expect this country to join on the side of the Romans, but then it kind of starts making sense, because essentially if Rome falls, essentially they will fall, but so will a lot of other countries, because many countries in the world, and also vice versa, by different powers controlling different regions and kind of safeguarding every superpower from not taking too much land. So that's the whole point of having a lot of superpowers kind of countering each other. A lot of smaller countries, for example, even over here, are safeguarded. For example, they are protected by the red team, which also is why most of them are in this alliance. But with that push over here, and Portugal essentially just getting more and more cooked by the day, they are going to begin to lose even more ground, even losing this major city over here in this region. But luckily for them, they are able to open a new front in Africa. But this also, I want to show a brand new layer that I have been working on and is currently in the works. But essentially what we have is the colonial layer, and this is like the same color, so my bad, but don't look at it like that. Essentially, as we see by the colonies, by the lighter colors, that obviously represents a colonial holding. For example, 3 countries that I have successfully finished for this are going to be Yemen over here, the Portuguese, and the blue team. As currently, as we see also even down here, these 2 regions are colonial, and they believe that this over here, as well as the Portuguese over here, they find that their core territory to their entire country. So I just wanted a quick explanation there. Back to this, we have the Portuguese opening a very large front, I mean, essentially as big as possible, to try to spread out the main military of the Romans, although, honestly, it didn't go too well, because they opened this large front, which, you know, nice, you got a whole nother thing to work with. Only issue is that they don't really care. They only care about truly their core territory, and this right here is kind of like left to rot, so not too much honestly happens over here. Obviously, they are going to hold some defensive lines, as they don't want to lose the entire colony. But even with a lot of pushes over here, they are mainly focused on just trying to kick the ass of Portugal in their core territory. But looking over here, we obviously see another fair share of issues, as in this region right here, we have them finally beginning to push the red team back, because their navy just can't really match up, because they use most of their navy to try to push this region and get this spot, but now they have officially gotten it back. But even with that advancement there, let's just say the red team is going to do some cooking, as they're going to absolutely fry the blue team in this northern region, And also, if we take a look at the religion, let me point out, this used to look very different. But over the years, the red team religion has definitely begun to shrink down. For example, in the northern region, it is almost entirely red team, which is why they were able to get it so easily. But with that, we even see the Romans actually get fairly close with under threat of being entirely cut in half. So what they do is they make a powerful encirclement in this region by making over maybe 30,000 soldiers flee back to this main region, which just simply allowed them to reinforce this area to look like this, where the Romans essentially spread their resources a little too much in a few regions, which allowed them to make such a large push over here. And seeing how alliance-centered Europe currently is, don't worry, I will slightly simplify for you. Because the next thing that is going to be unfolding is Egypt is going to be joining the war on the Diamond Alliance's side, and I mean, essentially, this was a long time coming, let's be honest here. I mean, just remember, Egypt had a burning hatred for the Romans for quite a while now after they lost that war, and they made it their sole purpose, and their propaganda along with that, to make everyone in their country hate the Romans, which was done quite successfully. So with that, they are successfully able to get the entire Triangle Alliance into this war as well, which, as a matter of fact, let's get good old Libya over here to do some work, as they have also been slightly cooking up a little bit, although not too much though. But with that, these two are able to actually work together to even begin roughly a large encirclement, which did not go as planned, and there was roughly maybe 40,000 soldiers here to essentially protect the entire region, but as we know, it did not go too well. So essentially, this area is going to be split between the Portuguese and the Egyptians. But also, to simplify everything slightly more, what I'm going to do is temporarily swap all alliances over to the Diamond one to represent that it is truly the Diamond Alliance that they are all fighting for. So over here we have obviously Egypt, Yemen, the Southern Turks, and Libya. And with that, this definitely sways the tides of the war, showing that the Romans are not in the best positions as a matter of fact. But luckily for them, they are going to try to get some of their own little alliance members, and the first country to do so is going to be over here, as we have the Orange Balkan nation, kind of. I don't even know what this is. Like Macedonia, kind of. Like, that's like, this is the Greece part, and like I don't know, the Orange Balkaners or something, I don't know. But basically, with this help, they are able to mainly just open a brand new front, which is going to be a massive aid to the blue team, as seeing how much fronts they've begun to lose, they are not having the best of times. But this is also because their buddy, their closest ally, France, is doing absolutely nothing. And when I mean nothing, I mean nothing. They haven't heard anything from them in like months since this war has started. They have been silent. And the best guess so far is that they're having like internal issues, or maybe even the start of a French civil war, revolution. But currently there is absolutely no clue what is possibly going on in France, and people are definitely worried on what could be the issue over here, because realistically, they lost their second most powerful nation, so now it's essentially only the Romans, the South Spanish, and the Orange team versus the Egyptians, Portuguese, and Red team as the main countries. So yeah, it's pretty bad. But with this new front being opened, they are able to start a few offenses in this region, with their main goal trying to capture this major city over here to try to spread out further into the country. So they are able to get to roughly over here until they are finally stopped by many forces, which, as a matter of fact, we can also see new forces begin to unveil in this region over here, as we do see the pink team, which is on the side of the diamonds, as they are a close ally to the red team. They are successfully able to encircle most of the regions around this main major city, preparing to try to encircle it and then take it, which, as a matter of fact, they are almost able to do until most troops successfully flee outward, which force them to push back all the way to this region over here, which, you know, not too good, just saying. But with this impending doom, it is only questioned furthermore on what is essentially going on and why everyone is folding under the pressure, as the Romans, now surpassing I guess right before this war started, they resurpassed the Chinese as the #1 spot, so now they are the #1 spot again. It's a lot of back and forth, I must say. While they are close, they have begun to spread out the gap, so they are #1 for quite a while now. But they are probably going to lose the #1 spot again, seeing that the Chinese essentially are doing oh wait, no. Right. I think they are both losing the #1 spot anyway. And don't worry, we will get to Asia in a second, as Asia is not going to be any more forgiving, let me point that out. But the main thing that I want to be doing over here is looking at the alliances. Finally, we see the French doing something, as they have finally returned from their little old slumber and whatever they were doing, and they are finally ready to take action by invading their closest ally. And no, I am not joking, and neither is anyone else who is saying this, because now the Romans are questioning their life decisions on what the hell just happened. Their closest ally just straight up betrayed them, and now they are putting their own forces into this region after they just exerted all of their military in almost every single front. And so while they are pondering and trying to ask what the heck is going on, they are just losing more and more land until they even get their country split into two, where this region with like Aragon and stuff is essentially split over here, and the rest of the Italian regions are fighting for their life, as they essentially just don't have the military capability to do so. And luckily, some little philosophers and other people working in the government put up the greatest plan ever. Try to get as many countries on your side, which is definitely going to work, because if we also take a look at the alliances, there's a lot that are going to join. But before we get to that, the main thing they're also wondering is why the French actually betrayed them. And after sending a few little spies into the main government, they are able to figure out a few things. And the main thing being is this was planned for a very, very long time, as it had originally started as a plan to completely ruin the Romans, seeing that the French honestly believed that they should have a lot of these regions, and they even aligned with a lot of ideas that the Red and Portuguese had, as they were originally planning this for a long time, until the French also realized about this through a few spies, and they actually wanted to join this. And this is essentially what was going to lead up to the First World War. But also seeing that they're doing that, that means they're also going to invade their old, I guess, country until it like broke away. So that's not good for them. So you can also kiss goodbye to like this entire front. And this country is about to fold under the pressure. Very, very quickly. They do not exist anymore, because they did not expect the French joining, and truly, no one who was unaware of this was going to guess that. But like I said, speaking of the alliances, there are two that are more than interested on joining this. The first obviously being the Germanic tribes, or they're not even tribes, the Germanic states, because as we know, the Germans are obviously quite terrified, seeing that you have the Red Team and now the French working on one alliance, because these are the exact countries that would love to take a piece out of this region for themselves. So truthfully, they are kind of terrified, and since they would have the Romans kind of balancing things out, that would not have been an issue. But seeing that the Romans are now at threat of complete disappearance, they have to make the decision to join this war for their own safety. So what we have is all of the Germanic nations working together to essentially swap alliances for now to join this main war to essentially ensure their survival. So with this, all the Germanic states will eventually swap sides, and now we have this war getting much larger. Now, if you remember, I did mention two alliances, and the second one is going to be none other than the Byzantine states, because as we remember, they obviously are not friends with the Red Team, first red flag, and secondly, oh my, The Egyptians, their number one haters. So having two of these members on the same team obviously also has its own red flags, along with these two countries, which they also absolutely despise. So there is literally no better time to jump them than now. So what we have is all of these states over here will very quickly go ahead and also join this. And honestly, this was going to be one of the best aids because the Byzantine Empire United is quite a powerful country. And seeing that you essentially have them right now in some form, I guess, is going to be quite helpful. Because they are technically united, they are just all separate states, so a little less organized, but still, better than nothing. So the first task is going to be getting rid of Egypt's biggest money-making machine, and that is going to be this strait over here, which obviously the main countries like Crimea have to take, because Crimea is quite a large and powerful country, and to get most of its imports, they have to go through the Black Sea, which, guess who owns it? Of course, Egypt. So their step one is to essentially take this area back for themselves, which, seeing where Egypt's military is right now, slaughtering blue team, slaughtering Romans, essentially, that's what they're doing. Basically, we are going to see them have little to no issue on this fortress, as strong as it is, because this is just the full military, and seeing that a lot of the population here is still Byzantine, they will gladly rejoin any of these regions over here, as unlike in our world where you obviously have the Turks and like the Greeks, which are very different, these are all the exact same people, even though they are on two separate continents. And with that, we also see them start their very own offensive over here, as this Turkish country essentially has betrayed them, as they used to be a core territory of the Byzantine Empire, but after they joined the Egyptian side, they have felt more like a traitor and not a true ally. So with that, they will have to punish this country for what they have done, and in return, they are going to try to retake this region for themselves and topple this evil government. So with this, we obviously have these fronts officially opening up, and while the Egyptians definitely saw this coming, they did not see this coming actually as soon as it did. So we even see a few regions over here start falling under the pressure, where they won't get obviously too far, but it is better than nothing, as they are able to get a few regions over here to roughly look like this. So now Egypt has to redirect some forces, as they were honestly kind of hoping to navally invade the mainland, which, newsflash, not happening, but they have their hopes and dreams, let them have it, don't worry. But one thing that I do have to point out is, in recent years, this is going to be quite important, but the Russians and the Mongols have been getting quite buddy-buddy with each other. What does that mean? You'll just have to watch the video to find out. But over the years, they've become better and better allies, and as a matter of fact, as a sign of friendship, it has gone so good to the point where even the Mongols kind of retracted their whole deal over here by trying to take this region, and if anything, have just begun supporting the Russians to take this entire region for themselves. Which, obviously, newsflash, someone's not very happy about, but that doesn't really matter. But what is going to matter a very, very large amount is the Russians devising a new plan with the Mongols for their AKA trying to dominate the entire world. And the first step with that is going to be joining the Trapezoid Alliance. And yes, I did say this war was going to get very, very big, much bigger than you would have actually even expected. So let me try to describe to you what hellhole is about to unfold. Obviously, as we know, Estonia got crippled not too long ago by the Russians, and seeing that they are obviously allied with the Red Team, if the Red Team successfully wins, they will never, ever get that chance again to declare war and take these lands. So if they could essentially take this now and potentially just peace out before anything actually gets bad, they could gain so much from this war, because if they get all of Estonia, which does have one of the best quality of lives, just imagine what a superpower they could eventually become if they successfully get rid of Crimea, their #1 competitor. So with that, we have them, but more scarily, the Mongols joining this war. So yes, you bring one, you also bring the other. So over here in this region, we have these two countries joining these alliances, and this essentially completely sways the tide of this war. As the Mongols have such a massive army, it is basically unfathomable to the rest of Europe. Which is why, in a matter of days, let me just describe to you what is about to happen. We have over here, Estonia, which in a matter of a few days loses this region. So you know what they do? They instantly surrender. Like, I'm talking, they fold under the pressure faster than like a bendable phone. Okay, that's how bad that's how bad we're talking. It's been like okay, so while we had Denmark in like 6 hours, this 3 days. Okay, not as bad, but 3 days folded under the pressure. Okay, and like it's pretty bad. But as you can expect, someone else is not quite happy with this, and of course, this is going to be the Circle Alliance. And while truthfully they aren't the biggest fan of the Red Team or even the Diamond Alliance in general, they see the issue that could potentially be, and I mean that will be if the Russians win this. So as a counter, they are all going to separately join the Diamond Alliance to essentially try to counter the Russians. And boy, we are just getting started. This has just been countries joining. It's been like 20 minutes, jeez. So with this, at this point, we are almost having all of Europe, which as a matter of fact, is there even... I knew I was forgetting something. Obviously, in this region, we had a few things happening, and the biggest thing was obviously the French taking the colony over here in this region, as we know, the Romans just literally can't get to this colony. I think that's quite self-explanatory, but also over here, like, the Dutch can't really do anything. They're really far away. But they do try to hold this region, as they do really want to protect this, like, colony in Java, as it is quite valuable. So they are able to successfully hold off over here. So looking currently at this, I think what I want to do is quickly highlight what this war essentially truly looks like. In the simplest terms, this is what the war looks like. We even had the colonial holdings over here, which I didn't fully color, but that's not too bad, because looking over here, mainly in Europe, this is what the war currently looks like. As we obviously have the Red Team being colored by all the red areas. They have quite a large holding in Africa. And looking over here, we have Europe, which is quite split between many areas, but roughly this is what the war is currently looking like, and let's just say, it is definitely going to be one bloody war. And it is time we finally take a bit of a breather from Europe and look at a separate region, being Asia. As we know, with these two main alliances, after this one being made, essentially the Star Alliance just shit their pants and they are now folding completely under the pressure. But luckily for them, they are able to get one more country, which is debatable to be either a good or bad thing, due to their recent humiliation, and that is none other than the Indians. Because as we know, while they did fold under the pressure in this war, don't worry about that. We are luckily able to see them join this alliance to try to make up for their loss. Which now, it is safe to say, technically these countries are not at war, but all it takes is one to make the wrong move and everything explodes. And who else would it be than the gold team to make the first move by just, even without their limestone, just full rush bombing towards the blue team, as they obviously do not like each other. So they are going to devise a plan to essentially cut the brand new northern regions in half, along with this brand new country over here. So they are going to attempt to work together by luckily securing these two major cities that look something like this. And they are going to try to work together to get this region over here, which successfully does end up working, where they are able to cut it off. But then you look at the casualties and you realize this was absolutely not worth it, as all you cut off was a bunch of random lands that did not even matter. You just wasted like 60,000 men for absolutely nothing. So, but I mean, hey, look on the bright side. There's nothing here. There's not even a major city. They just got a bunch of random lands. Good job, bro. Good job. But looking over here, we will see the main fighting happen, and probably the most interesting, as truly it is unknown who is going to be the winner in this war. as we do have China, which does have the absolutely superior military, at least main naval, I guess not navally. Then navally definitely goes to South China. Just look at their empire. But in terms of the land military, it is going to essentially get crushed by the regular Chinese, as they are going to start making many invasions into all of these regions, with essentially just no slowing down, along with some large encirclements, like over here in this region. China is essentially just going to have a not very fun time. And luckily for them, they are actually successfully able to move their capital city, because they see the absolute terror that will unfold if they just kind of leave it there. So luckily for them, they are able to relocate it to this southern capital city over here, at least temporarily. Because guess what? The Chinese are coming and they are not slowing down, as they essentially just keep taking more and more land, and they are genuinely struggling to try to hold any fronts. And it gets worse when they even invite Vietnam to take land from them in these regions over here, in return for just simply joining this alliance. And I mean, seeing how badly the Chinese are doing, this is just essentially a no-brainer move for them to go and join for some extra land. But in retaliation, we do also end up seeing this country, which did recently unite under, well, join this alliance temporarily to essentially counter Vietnam, as they see the genuine issue if Vietnam does win this war. And I know what you may be thinking, and yes, this war just in general has been going extremely back and forth, and that is because these sides are not giving up, and they are only making this war worse and worse and more deadly. So this is a choice that they've been doing, and it has not been going very well. So essentially, looking at these two regions, normally they would not have much in common, but then you start to think two massive wars globally are essentially completely separate, which is quite interesting, as this is the largest scaled war technically, like separately, because I mean, you have the first and second deadliest war in history happening simultaneously. That's kind of funny. No, it's not. Why? You know what? I didn't say anything. Shut up. But interestingly enough, someone comes up with an interesting idea, and that is going to be none other than India. Now, should you listen to them after what recently happened? Probably not. But seeing how desperate everyone truly is and how badly everyone is losing, they are going to hear them out, because of course, as this is going on, we have the blue India nation slash, like, I don't know what this region truly is. It's like all over the place, so. But basically, with them pushing deep into Indian territory, seeing that they have to spread their military out through multiple regions, for example, even over here, where they are also losing ground. There really isn't a place where they're winning any ground. So with the two main regions where they're losing ground, they have to think of a brand new plan, seeing that their alliance is utterly outmatched, with the only region they are truly winning in is obviously the Gold Team, which is the most powerful country in their alliance. But seeing essentially the Gold Team also does struggle in a lot of these regions, where they are trying their best to push back, but I mean, to some avail, but I mean, seeing how badly this is all looking, we even have a few countries in their alliance also kind of folding under the pressure, which is definitely not good news, seeing how badly everything has been going. As we also see, I guess, the old Cyan team, which collapsed recently and was split up to like 5 different countries. They are essentially also just going to be able to luckily push with their pink team ally over here to essentially quickly capture the capital of this country, and they are able to fully collapse it, being the first Asian country in the war, I believe, to fully collapse. And it did not take very long for this country to essentially fold under the pressure, as we also see them starting a new advancement over here in this region, and it is quite well said that they are absolutely screwed. But now I think it's time we talk about that little idea that Purse India had, and that idea is trying to unite alliances. Now, what do I actually mean by that? If we take a look at the alliances one more time, we have 2 essentially underdogs slash losers, which are getting kind of folded under the pressure, and that is, I mean, mainly Asia, but to a point in degree, we also have the Trapezoid Alliance, which is also somewhat losing this war, as while they are winning in some regions, overall, the biggest powerhouse is kind of getting folded under the pressure. As also recently, bad news, we've also had the Portuguese start making a large pushback in this region, as they've also successfully gone to these regions over here, and if anything, the Spanish portion of the country is getting more and more unstable by the minute. So Purse India and the rest of the Star Alliance will send a secret message to the Romans specifically, with the deal saying to work together and bring these two alliances together as one, so they could send further aid to each other, as obviously they both have stuff that the other doesn't. So if they work together, they could potentially beat back the opposing alliances in their well-respected war, obviously. And with this, the Romans are going to think about it, and they realize that this is easily the best course of action that they could possibly do, because specifically, the biggest thing they need is more manpower, which specifically Asia excels in, as they have countries like South China, India, specifically the Gold Team, are all powerhouses in specifically manpower, while most of Asia, if anything, needs industrial regions and technology, which is exactly what Europe has. So if they are able to work together to exchange these things, they might just have a shot at winning this war. So with that, what we are going to be seeing is they are going to unite their alliances together under one brand new mega alliance, also being the largest alliance in history, where we have all of these countries swapping to the Trapezoid Alliance, but just think of it as they combine. I'm just making them Trapezoid Alliance for now. And with this, we essentially have the largest and most powerful alliance in history. And while obviously it is going to take a few months to obviously get all of these regions to start connecting up with each other, once the news got out, it was pure chaos on both alliances, mostly in Europe, as they are terrified to have to deal with all of these massive armies, seeing that they already have the Mongols rushing their way. And speaking of the Mongols, they've been doing quite nasty damage to a lot of these countries, specifically over here in Crimea and their main allies. But what we are going to be seeing is one final country for this video join this alliance, or I guess a alliance. Didn't really specify which one. And that is none other than the Caspian nation, which was one of the most popular countries in the series for quite a while. They were a fan favorite for a little bit, but mainly after they got crippled in their war against the Pink Team, which let me quickly pull up what they used to look like to anyone who forgot or just doesn't know. If you look by this outline, they lost an absurd amount of land. While they did gain a few regions, this is mainly the stuff that they lost over in all of these areas, as they even lost portions in Crimea. This over here, point is they lost a lot of land. And seeing that they could potentially get most of it back, they are obviously going to join this war. The Mongols are now quite occupied with trying to protect the rest of their alliance, specifically the Russians, which does allow them to make a few small advancements in this region, especially in the north, because also, if we pull up this over here, we have the religion, which has not changed a lot. But with that, if you guys did end up joining today's video, being one of the largest so far in all of Wixo, hello and welcome to the 22nd episode on What If Civilization Started Over. Now, obviously, we are now getting to potentially the climax of the First World War. So, as we know, World War I is becoming much more devastating, and honestly, I would say it might be reaching how devastating World War I was in our world. And, I mean, we haven't even gotten to the climax yet. So, this war is much, much bigger than it was in ours. So, the real question now is truly how bad is it going to get from here? And to that, I say I have no clue. I mean, I do, but I'm not going to tell you. And I know, like last time, we spent the entire video on the First World War, and don't worry, that will be the main topic. We are actually going to take a small detour and look at something completely different. And that is going to be North America, as many events have actually happened without us technically even knowing, as we have been all way too preoccupied with Europe, Asia, Africa, and Oceania. So we have completely left this area to kind of do its own thing. So there's going to be two main things that we are going to be seeing. The first is multiple unifications that have ended up happening throughout the years. For example, these two countries over here, although they are more similar to tribes, they do technically count as a country. They are just not in the most developed state, which is why they united with these two larger ones, which are more formally known and like properly worked out. The second thing was actually a war, which we don't really see often in North America, as they mostly tried to stick together due to someone. But due to these past years of this war going on, Europe has been preoccupied. So we see this I need to learn my states. Oh God. But point is, this American country over here will launch its own invasion on this North America, the U.S. country. Oh my God. But anyway, what we are going to be seeing is they are going to successfully split this country into two regions. And just for some background, the main reason they are attacking this country is so they could get more powerful, but also to stop the Portuguese from potentially taking it over, which could be a serious threat. But luckily, they're fighting for their lives somewhere else, so they should be fine for now, which is why we also see them essentially just kind of keep cutting off these regions. And I forgot to turn on major cities, which they don't have much of. But with that, the capital will also be swiftly taken, along with a full annexation of the country, so it does not exist anymore. So now we have this country essentially doubling in size, and now rivaling countries like Toronto, the Irish, and like Mississippi. So they are probably not the happiest about that. And speaking of Mississippi, they actually have done their own little bit of exploring in this region over here, where they have found a lot of like fairly nice regions, I guess. Because I mean, this is roughly where the prairies are, I'm pretty sure. So you could get some like gophers or something, eh? How does that sound? But point is, with that, they are able to take these regions all over here. And they even begin to connect up over here. And while everyone has been obviously doing this, one of the few European countries that are actually not in this war is the Irish. And they're a solid powerhouse. So they took this opportunity for themselves by exploring a lot of North American regions, because since everyone was so preoccupied with countries like continents like Africa, everyone didn't really pay much attention to North America, and due to World War I starting, no one has even touched South America yet. But don't worry, that's going to happen fairly soon. But with that, we see them essentially taking over all of these regions over here with the help of exploration. And of course, they are going to take a lot of these lands for themselves, because I mean, why wouldn't they? So the main thing we see is the Irish set up a new colony in this prairies region over here, where they successfully take these lands. But since they don't want to start a war and get upset with all the natives, as they wouldn't have any backing from the rest of Europe, they are actually going to attempt to purchase this single island over here, which does go successful, although it was quite expensive to be granted. So they definitely lost quite a bit of money, but it just does make it easier for them to hop around different regions to just make it easier for themselves, which is exactly why they did that. Looking over here, we also have Mississippi, which is one of the more powerful nations over here in North America. We'll do some further expansion in this northern region, but honestly not too much, as the most of it is probably just going to get taken by the Scots. Did I call this Irish? I don't even remember. But with that, we also see the Scottish make their way through all of these northern islands to essentially just make it easier if they ever choose to travel, but also just kind of to flex that they have a big colony, as I do believe they have the largest, well, I mean, they definitely do now, but at the time, I think they still had like the largest like single colony, although they didn't have the largest colonial empire, as I think that might even go to Portugal now that I think about it, so that kind of checks out. But with that, we see the tidying up of all of these borders, thanks to of course, me. But mainly with this, we see how much the Irish have actually grown in size, or at least their colony. It is very, very big. But as this was going on, they also did do one more thing. And that is sadly invade one of the most peaceful countries in the entire world. And that is going to be southern Greenland. Because as we know, they used to be a native tribe here that just existed for a very long time. And was very, very good friends with the breakaway, with I guess Quebec, as they eventually did, break away from the French without the French even knowing. So with that, with their friendship, essentially about to be ruined because they are not going to exist anymore. Quebec does tell them that they are going to be very, very upset if they do not let them go. But obviously, they don't really care. What is Quebec gonna do? That doesn't matter, because what does matter is them getting fully annexed, and Greenland is now under one single country's control, and that is of course the Scottish. So now we see them eventually growing their empire, as this is essentially the perfect time for them to do that, as everyone is preoccupied in killing each other. Now looking over here, one country that I do want to quickly address is actually Sweden, because as interesting as it would be, they can't really join a side, and I'm about to explain why. Because first of all, as Finland beat them to the Diamond Alliance, as obviously they despise the Russians and then to an extent the Mongols, so that's why they did that. But also, for example, that is going to have to knock out the Diamond Alliance because this country despises the Finnish, and also the other way around. So obviously, Diamond, no go. Why can't they join the Trapezoids, you may ask? Well, if you remember, they went to war with the Germans multiple times, along with this being a breakaway, so they have terrible relations here. So essentially, they don't really have the option with any alliance. So what are they going to do? Go ahead and invade a poor random country that did absolutely nothing, but also because they do not want to go ahead and rejoin with their glorious empire. I guess that's valid in some way, but they will luckily be able to take these regions over here until we actually see Finland go ahead and take the rest of these regions. Even though they are literally in a war, it didn't honestly take much military, as this was the entire population, and the rest of this region was a bunch of empty land, as well as this over here. All that's going to happen is every side just gets fully annexed on their own accord, which roughly looks something like this, and this country ceases to exist, where we kind of start seeing a slightly more united Scandinavia, and now it is only 3 separate countries. But what we are going to see is some interesting action go on over here, as we are finally gonna make our way to one of the to one of the larger fight scenes going on in Europe, which we haven't even covered yet, and that is going to be the Russian Mongols against the Caucasus, Crimea, and Romanian country. Now, the first thing that we do see is as they were putting a lot of their military over here, we luckily saw the Russians, at least luckily for them, they were able to push into this region as there wasn't that much military, as they broke through making a small spearhead alongside taking this major city over here, where we have them starting a front line to look something like this. But in a region where they do start losing quite heavily is over here, where they do lose actually 2 major cities in the first few weeks. And why this may be happening, you may ask, that is because the red team is using a lot of its military to go through the Romanians, as well as just the Romanian military. But with them working together, they are essentially able to beat back the Russians, also because they just started losing in a brand new front over here in Finland, as, since they kind of joined the war, that is also going to sway the tides, as the Russians are now in a bit of a pickled situation. But also what we see happening is with the helps of some very small rebel groups, as they are, let's just say, a little pissed at the government for surrendering, along with a lot of Finnish military and support, we start seeing them liberating multiple areas over here in Estonia, even retaking the capital from, I guess, this region. And essentially, this is where we see something happen. We see a large split occur, where obviously we have another rebel group, Except this one doesn't fully agree with the matter of this new government, as essentially in the south we have the main government which was originally ruling Estonia, which as a matter of fact I should probably swap the colors, but I won't, because this one's I guess better recognized as the original. And this region over here essentially realizes that they cannot work together, and essentially they are going to try to break away again. That's what happened with the Russians. We do not need another Russia. But with that, we do eventually have these two regions looking like this. And after a little bit of infighting, it begins to be a bit of a mini war, where these regions essentially go back and forth until it is finally settled that they are going to try to make peace with each other, at least to their fullest extent, as they are going to try to make some official borders, seeing that the Russians have officially crossed the border, which is what kind of spiked Estonia to make this deal, because they do not want to lose their entire country. Malim. And with this is going to be the official borders that these two countries have agreed upon. Now, for the little bit of context, first of all, their capital will be over here in this region over here. The main thing that I wanted to talk about was quickly to point out that the Estonians, obviously, like I said, were kind of running out of time and hope, which is why they were able to bargain for this very valuable region, at least to them, over here. Just wanted that to be a little bit of a heads up. But with some Finnish support, we do also see the Estonians work together with a lot of the combined military to start a large offensive in this region, and they are going to try to hold some powerful defense, which goes surprisingly well, but they do not successfully take this region over here, which is firmly under Russian hands. But as we take a look away from that, we could take a look over here, with Caspia actually kind of having a top 5 lock-in, and seeing that a lot of the population, they didn't really get rid of a lot of the population, as they didn't really expect this to ever really happen. We see a lot of Caspian people start to rise up and try to work together to regain their old lands, which goes surprisingly poorly for the Mongols, as they are able to cut them off completely from the Caspian Sea, and they are able to slowly take more and more regions until they are finally stopped by the main military. Where in this case, we see the Mongols marching down straight into this main country, splitting these regions into two different sections, as this, yes, costed a lot of military and money. Was it worth it? Probably, as they successfully encircled a massive amount of soldiers in this region over here, and as they begun to flee, they kind of had to flee in this region, but, that's when you realize it's a bit of a fumble. As you look over here, they could successfully just do that back there, and then they go back into the country. So not the best, but luckily for them, they were able to at least somewhat get rid of them permanently. So that will not be an issue for the future, hopefully. But at least for now, we do not see them push any further, as it is mostly the people who just constantly are rising up and essentially holding main defense. So it's essentially just a constant back and forth in this region. We can also kind of see which regions are being taken to kind of show that this is exactly what the country essentially used to look like, which is why we have these regions constantly popping back up under this main control. But looking over here, we see a few other things occur, like Egypt and Caspia devise a brand new plan, because if we take a look at what the war is currently looking like, it essentially looks something like this. Also, just for the sake of it, I did color the Chinese alliance essentially under the same color. Just wanted to point that out. So essentially, you have the red and blue team, which are the closest essentially working together. And right now, let's just say they are not having a very good time. And for example, they can't even get to each other. Or at least they couldn't until now. As Caspia and Egypt devise a brand new plan to try to fix that issue, and that is invading this poor Iraq country right over here. Basically, if they could connect this country up and potentially change the government, they could get it to join their side of the war. And I mean, I don't know about you, but that sounds like a great idea. So essentially what they are going to do is, here's the essential plan. Caspia is going to make the first invasion with a little military as they have to fight for their lives over here. So with this invasion going very, very well, they are essentially going to halt it and try to hold defense while they have to rush back for the main army over here. In that case, the main thing we will be seeing is Egypt punch a lot of firepower into this, as it is going to be mainly them, but also Yemen troops also are helping out greatly in this war, are the main aid in this region as they are able to swiftly capture the capital city, and with essentially no other main regions, everything else is kind of just a walk in the park, as they are successfully able to take the rest of this region, as well as this is potentially going to help them make a new advancement very, very soon. And okay, this looks so goofy, but the country essentially went from originally looking like this to getting gravely shrunken down in size, this twig stick thingy. But the main thing now is that the government has completely changed, even though they obviously deny it. And for some strange reason, I wonder why, they join the Diamond Alliance to help out their apparently greatest buddies of all time, even though these are countries that they normally despise, that for them to try to help out in this war. Which, they do hold to that they are going to help them out as they begin invading this Turkish nation over here, capturing this major city, and forcing them to completely pull back out of this region. Although over here, we do also see them lose ground in this region, as we even see the Southern Turks completely lose this region over here, which is luckily completely given to the red team, and now these guys are essentially on the run as they are getting kind of cooked. But essentially, they are going to devise a brand new plan, and that is essentially going to be lock in, as the Egyptians, now that they have finished this and are distracting this country over here, are going to start a brand new invasion of this region, essentially regaining most of this access in this region, as well as completely pushing them out over here, because essentially Egypt, one of the most powerful countries in the world, has essentially no other fronts to worry about, as right now the Romans are getting screwed in the ass right now. I think that's safe to say. Like, look at this, they are not having a good time. So the only thing they really have to focus on is the Byzantines, which is not even right now at its fullest extent. So right now, let's just say they are gonna have a great time with all of these countries, as they are going to, for example, over here, you could kiss goodbye to this country's existence, as they just completely destroyed all the infrastructure to basically no repair. That country's not coming back, let me tell you, okay? As well as they also start a brand new invasion of this country over here, as they are essentially just full throttling towards this eastern front, I guess western front, and they are trying to push west entirely in hopes of just securing everything. But as we see over here, we have the green team, which is about to fold under the pressure as they begin getting invaded by, I guess, the original Byzantine. I mean, the Byzantines are technically still alive, and they are somehow working with their #1 enemy. How does that work? Do not question it. But essentially, they are going to get to the outskirts of this capital, as well as a few other naval invasions, essentially shrinking this country gravely down in size. And looking over here, we also have a few of these countries which are about to fold under the pressure as well, as they literally just can't do anything. Don't know what else to tell you. Because obviously, with some additional help, we also have this small country over here successfully able to take over their #1 rival in the world, being this other small country. But we also have them taking over the small green one, along with the orange team kind of helping out to essentially sweep over the rest of this region. So now, there isn't really this micro-state front to worry about, and instead they have to worry about the much larger ones. Which over here, back in Anatolia, we still see a lot of back and forth take place, as no country can really make a large push besides this Eastern Turkish one. Why do I keep saying Eastern? This Western Turkish nation, which is the most powerful out of all the ones currently speaking. And they are able to make a large push in this region over here. I mean, technically they are weaker than the Southern Turks, but, well, actually, no, I would say they are stronger right now. I mean, especially now. These guys are getting crippled right now. So that explains it. But they are essentially going to continuously just putting pressure on this country, not even allowing it to take any breaths for action. So, yeah, no, they're getting absolutely cooked. But we're not worried about that right now. And I think it's time we take a look at one of the most important fronts in this entire war. And that is obviously going to be with the Romans. As right now, they kind of just stand alone, seeing that the Dutch are over here. The Germanics are over here busy, so as they are essentially a standalone in this region of the war. But essentially over here in this region, as they were making great advancements, it finally hit. As the Portuguese finally made a massive push over here, where they essentially kicked them out of this southern region, only leaving them with this very, very small portion over here. And it is finally time that the Portuguese will start a brand new war in this region over here, where they are able to successfully make their way over here. Over here, the Romans are able to make a small advancement to recapture this major city, but after other few small advancements, that is basically it, as the Romans are essentially just losing more and more ground as the days go on. Even over here, we have the orange team losing ground, only being pushed back to a few very, very small regions, mostly because the red team is just preoccupied with trying to fight them in this region over here, which luckily the Romans make a small pushback in, but still, not an easy task. And finally, we take a look at the Germanic areas, where the Dutch are out for blood, and they are essentially going to take this region with a lot of their military power, which is surprisingly strong, you gotta admit. But as well as they start this over here, which essentially their colony is a lot more valuable, or I guess they take a lot more care over, so they are successfully able to take the entire colony, actually, without any issue. Although in the other Germanic countries, it is not such a happy story, as over here we have them losing a massive amount of land, at least proportionally, where they are about to get steamed by them, but they can't push entirely because, again, they got to lock in for this front, which is still very, very difficult, as the Romans are constantly trying to break through this region. What we are going to see is essentially going to change the entire European front, and this is from one single country that you may expect to join the war, but you may not expect to be such a large influence. And that country is none other than London, of course. Essentially, London thought of the grave plan. Since they have such a large colonial empire, at least in Africa, that gives them at least some advantage. But the main thing that they are interested in is taking revenge on their old colonizer. Because I doubt many people are going to remember, but the French originally actually colonized the British Isles and eventually gave birth to London, including many, many other small states, but eventually it came down to the Scottish and London to be the only two remaining ones, which, as we see now, they are prepared to take their revenge by beginning a very quick naval invasion of this region, mostly because the entire military is essentially over here in this front, roughly looking something like this. And honestly, that's like 70% of their military, I'm going to be honest. And now they have to protect a new front that has recently been opened. For example, we have them completely losing Brittany from this, I guess, loss of a war, and they are going to continue losing many regions, as they just did not expect this to happen, as we have them working together with the Dutch to cut them off from almost all of North Sea access, which would be very, very bad if that actually does end up happening. So we actually see them mainly pulling back from most of these regions of the Germanics, only leaving a small area essentially to be left, while they are here trying to defend essentially what is going on. But looking over here is a different story, as the red team, let's just say, is not as intellectual. As, I mean, I don't have a name for the ruler, so maybe you guys could give me one, but mainly the ruler of the red team is very, very militaristic, not in the intellectual way, mainly just push for country, take over country, and hope for the best kind of strategy. Which, I mean, does work with this Germanic nation over here, as they're actually able to completely collapse it, and even start an invasion of this smaller one in this region right over here, as if they are successful, let's just say it will not be too good for them. So luckily for them, they are able to start this new offensive over here, which could leave a few regions kind of scared on what could potentially happen. But what is definitely going to change the thoughts on this war are when the Mongols make a brand new invasion, completely steamrolling all of these regions of Crimea. And I mean, this was them deciding to kind of screw this front for now and just use a bunch of their military which just has so many soldiers. It's unfathomable. And this essentially just collapses this front entirely, as they are pushed back almost completely to this Crimean region over here, and they are crippled to this smaller state. And a similar story does also happen with their southern ally over here, which looks something like this. What we also end up seeing is one of their arch enemies, their old breakaway, also declaring war, not on the side of the not on the side of the trapezoids, but just on the side of their own by trying to gain more land. And this is going to be the next country that does, as a matter of fact, completely collapse in this war. And seeing that they are about to start losing completely on the Eastern Front, they thought of a brand new plan. Because as we remember, obviously, the stars and trapezoids united under one alliance. So what we also see happening is the same offer will be given to the Parallelogram Alliance. But that won't be happening just yet, because they honestly think that they are going to win this war, and they really do not care on what could potentially happen in Europe. They mainly just care that they win this over here, and honestly, the more crippled Europe is, the better for them it is. But let's just say it is not going to be the best for them in a hot second, as we do end up seeing this entire region, at least in the south, completely collapse as they lose all of these holding regions, and essentially all of this region becomes trapezoid influence, and it is just everything is taken control. And this is where the magic happens, where we finally see everyone starting to simultaneously invade Vietnam. Because while they are a very powerful country, if you put them up compared to all of these other ones, it is essentially no match, as we have 3 separate countries beginning to invade them, and it is essentially just going to be a no-brainer that they are about to collapse. So Vietnam, wanting to preserve as much as their country, they do, as a matter of fact, go ahead and surrender over. And looking over here in this region, we do see even more countries join this war. You think you know who it is? I'll let you think about it. No? Can't get it? Maybe you can, maybe you can't. Well, it doesn't matter, as the countries are going to be these two, which at this point have grown quite close, as I've mentioned before. But that is mainly because of their arch enemy, the blue team. Only problem with the blue team is that at this point they have grown significantly more powerful than these two even combined. So this is the best choice of action for them to eventually take their revenge and try to win this war, which is exactly what happens. But they also are, don't question how, but they somehow are also able to invite one of their fairly good allies in this region, essentially promising a lot of valuable area over here if they simply join the war and help them out, which they do successfully do. And just like that, we have 3 new countries joining this war on the side of the Parallelogram Alliance. What? No, on the Trapezoid Alliance, which at this point is only growing in size, while we've only had the diamonds growing in size by 1. So right now they are winning in that ratio. And with this, with most of the military not even in the main country, we do see them successfully begin a large invasion of this region, where we have them pushing into this area over here. The same can also be said with the pink team, as they make this push over here in this region, as well as the green team making the largest one with also the most land viability. But this is also a mix of all 3 armies. I'm just going to color under the green team, where they successfully take this entire northern region, which forces them to fully push back and over here, which let's just say is not going to be a very fun time, as they are going to lose in all of these fronts. And this is essentially where the parallelogram, I think I need to shut up. But this is where we see where the Parallelogram Alliance realizes they cannot win this war alone. And while they do not like the Europeans, it may be their only hope if they unite together as well and essentially create the second, if not, actually, I think they would be the largest alliance in history. I think they would be even bigger than the trapezoids combined, I think. But with that, we could see the transition finally occur. And with this, we have this front eventually now. Like I said, we are going to now reach the official climax of World War I, with two of the largest alliances now uniting. So now we are going to see which side is going to prevail and which side is going to fail. Man, it actually kind of goes hard. Prevail and fail. You know what? That's my most like fire quote, guys. And on those other fronts, it is essentially going to be a lot of back and forth in these regions. As for example, we have this over here. But finally, we have them successfully pushing back and beginning to liberate this country over here, even getting the capital city. I almost forgot about one thing. As this has all been happening and no one has been paying much attention, the Egyptians are going to be doing some not very nice things. Because as we see over here, this country is going to essentially begin to lose all of its population and religion. And as this is going on, we see some of the most horrific stuff to date, as many regions are going to lose more and more people to these cleansings. And let me tell you, they are not going to be pretty, as they are riled up to even larger degrees, where we see more regions, even in the core territories, begin to lose more and more ground, while some even begin to completely disappear. While in this region, we have them doing a large campaign in this over here, and like I said, they aren't too worried about doing other things, as they have also been doing not very nice things to these separate populations like the Byzantines, which they probably hate to an even larger degree. So now we have these regions almost completely gone as well. And with that, hopefully you guys did end up enjoying this video. Honestly, this was a little more mixed up, but next episode will be a lot more refined and will actually be the conclusion of this war. Alright, hello and welcome to the 23rd episode on What If Civilization Started Over. You already know what is going to be happening, as we are on the finale of the First World War. And let me tell you, it is going to be absolutely devastating, as humanity just went through the largest war in human history, even bigger than ours as a matter of fact. Because this war has easily had over 200 million deaths, which is even more than World War II. Look at all of these countries. It's absolutely devastating. But with that, if you do end up enjoying this video, as it definitely takes a while to make all of these, it would be nice if you do leave a like and subscribe, as we are trying to reach 2K. But without further ado, I say we can now jump straight into this video. So as we can see, Europe, being the main and most important front, changed a lot throughout the last video. Specifically, as we saw London be a large tiebreaker in this war, as if we take a look back over here, not fully updated, but you could see that in Europe it's a little outmatched, because obviously after adding a few of these countries, that definitely changed. But also seeing Asia has a big front, a lot of stuff is just in general going on in the world. I wonder why. But it is for that exact reason why we start seeing the French start moving out of this main region over here in the south of this Germanic nation, actually getting completely kicked out, as well as from the north over here, as instead we are going to see a counteroffensive, with this country working together with its Germanic ally to essentially stop the French expansion as they make deep pushes into the region, and France is now officially on the run. And this finally gives the Romans their first opportunity in who knows how many months of pure setbacks in their nation, and people starting to get very, very upset. Because one thing that we should definitely be careful of is, if we remember, at this point it's definitely been a long time, but there was a very large Roman civil war that happened many years ago. And the most unstable region of the entire nation is easily Iberia. While they definitely lost most of those unstable regions, at this point, this region right here is probably the least stable, but it is still doing quite fine. So that is why they still have to be careful and not go too much on the offensive. But essentially, this is going to push back the French all the way to these small portions, and they are finally going to make their own offensive in this region, which, as we see, they are going to snatch this major city over here, and even begin liberating their old ally, which was taken over quite a while ago and did not have a good time. So with this, we see the eastern portion of this nation get liberated and make small advancements through also the people rebelling from the Portuguese. So with that, we see the Romans successfully cut this region off right here, and they will continue the push up north over here, with it eventually looking something like this. But over here, due to the large red team population that they just did not get rid of, at least they were planning to, they just didn't get there in time, it would not have been pretty one way or another, and this is going to allow the red team, which has surprisingly been standing quite well, mostly because they don't have many fronts to worry about. Their biggest issue is over here, but seeing that the south, I guess the rest of the regions over here are dealing with Egypt. They're getting cooked. But since it's only this single country, they are essentially trying their hardest to knock out the Romans, which are going quite successfully by even finally cutting off one of the greatest regions over here, which was essentially a large passageway that allowed them to travel across these two regions. So now they just have to go by water instead, not much an issue, but still a great devastation in the war, seeing how much effort they are putting into this. But unluckily for the red team, they also begin to lose lands over here in this Germanic portion, as they are going to successfully take this southern area right here, as well as begin to push back them over here. We are also going to see them start liberating their ally in this region over here until they begin nearing the capital, although it is finally stopped. Until the Dutch send a small military force in this region over here, mostly because they still have to worry about the French, which is still very, very strong. As we can see, them pushing back many regions over here, for example, Normandy and all of this stuff, not the best area, because they are still a very strong country. It's just that it's a little scarier now that the Romans have finally made a break through their defenses. Although one region that was never expected for anything to happen was over here in the South Boot, where a very bold move, I must admit, made by Crete, where they chose it would have been the best option to navally invade this region. And I'm gonna be honest, it kind of was, because no one in their right mind would have expected the invasion of South Italy. But also, you have to realize this major city specifically is very, very important, as this used to be the original capital of the Romans until they decided to move it over here. So this is a very important major city, also being the second most populated in the south. So they now have to send some military units back down south, allowing the red team to hold its front since they were about to re-push. So that was honestly a quite intellectual move, but also it costed a bunch of Crete lives. Now they only have this. Real smart one. But anyway, looking over here, we can also take a look where they finally were able to completely take over this green country over here successfully. And we do also see this country over here get further pushed back by losing that major city, as well as this over here, until Egypt is finally going to properly step in, as they've been mainly aiding a lot of countries in this war to keep them afloat, which is the main reason the red team has been doing so well, but also a separate reason why Crete made this little passage, so it's easier for them to ship military stuff through all these other regions. So that is the main thing that is going on over there. But over here, we do also see the Egyptians make a large push in this region, essentially with such a large force that it essentially just can't be withstood. I think that's the proper word. As this country over here is going to essentially get folded under the pressure until they are just this one small region over here. And something else that is quite interesting that will be happening is over here in this region, we are actually going to see a swap occur, where the Russians are going to give the Ping team with their massive army full control of Crimea, mostly thanks to the Romanian ally, which is pushing into the country which they needed more troops to try to defend, as the Russians were not having a good time over here, as they were losing a surprisingly large amount of land. Because, I mean, I don't know, Romania just had like a top 5 lock-in. But as they are pushing in this southern region over here, which is honestly going very well, and they almost completely pushed them out, only leaving a few regions looking like this. Although the only issue is over here, where we see Finland continue gaining more and more land in this region, and, whenever I pull up the religion map, it is never a good thing. Let me just point that out. That's kind of the thing that I've realized. Whenever I pull up the religion map, it is not good. But over here, due to some crossing of the borders, some interesting things have been occurring recently, and those things have not been very nice. Essentially, in these few militarized regions that look like this, even this major city, essentially these pockets are going to completely get eradicated from the eastern, like, I guess it started in Eastern Europe and then kind of spread through Asia. So technically, I could properly call it the Eastern European religion, but then it's weird because it goes all the way over here into Asia. I think that I need a proper name for this religion. It's so weird. But for now, I'll just call it the Eastern European one, because over here we finally see some interesting stuff happen, you know? That's the best way I could put it. And obviously, they are not too happy with that, and they see the true issue of this region, so they move their priorities from trying to push into this region over here, into moving on from this over here, so they could try to stop this massacre from occurring. But it is already too late, as many regions have already been completely wiped out off the map. But a separate thing that we are going to be doing is obviously taking a little break, as you know, war can be intense. So why don't we take a separate war that's a little smaller and calmer? Because over here in India, as we know, there we go. Over here in this region, it has been an absolute chaotic hellhole, with many small nations slowly and steadily rising to power. For example, one war that has been happening is over here, where we had this small red team invade this small portion over here, but essentially the rest of it was also invaded by this small one over here, which was completely wiped out, and then this region was then taken over, and then they got this whole thing, and then they became a superpower of the region. But then it gets weirder, because instead of the normal infighting, what we have is something else happen, because as we know, this small country over here started off as any other, except they made one of the bold moves of expanding northward, farly surpassing them from any of their puny little rivals in the south. But as the years have gone by, they have made separate deals, and those deals have been for unity and prosperity, because if they essentially unite with this country, they will be safe from any other. So we see many of these small countries begin uniting with this one over here, as we see many regions over here begin uniting under one banner, creating a lot of horrible exclaves, until most of them are fixed, essentially leaving it roughly to something like this, where all of these have united, and we see the slow unity of India. But looking over here in this region, we will see a war begin with the two superpowers of the region, being the purple team and the green team. And I mean, I say superpower, although these are one of the weakest countries in the entire world. Don't worry about it, though. But the purple team with the superior military will be able to successfully, through essentially completely taking over the country, and actually becoming quite a sizable one. Because if we take a look, I mean, they're small, but like they're not horrifically small, I guess. As well as they annexed this small region. Oopsie. Oh no. That can't be good. Well, I mean, I think that had to have been expected. But by the end of these few years going by, as let me point out, this has all been through mid-war, like all of it. In the end, through all annexation, unity, and war, we are now left with 3 countries in South India, instead of it being like the 50 million that it always was. So who knows what could potentially happen in the near future. And over here, we could finally take a look at another region that has been up to many things, and that's obviously war. As over here, we see one of the largest developments in the war happen. Essentially, northern China will lose its capital through its siege from Korea. And I mean, this was very much unexpected, as Korea did not mean even to make North China fold this much under the pressure, but they did. So I mean, they're not complaining. It kind of happened. Okay, I gotta okay, Asia's like the big hellhole where I can't remember which country's in which alliance because there's so many things. But over here, we will sadly see the Blue Punjab country, which rose to power, will have its slow demise as all of its neighbors will begin pushing in, where essentially the country will have no chance of true survival until it's just going to get worse and worse and more crippled. Over here, we also have the South Indians making a large push for this northern region, where it will be able to make a large sweep, where they are going to successfully take these two major cities, and the country is going to be squished with these regions until they, as long as these two do not take the capital, they're good, except India's being a little slow. So instead, they go ahead and surrender to India, because if they did, that would not have went well. Let me just point that out. If any of these two countries right here got to the capital, it would be a horrific fate for this one, which is exactly why we see them surrendering. Oh yeah, and over here, yikes, not a good, okay. You kind of warned them that it would not go, okay. So that's, that's bad. Okay, so you just lost two, no, you lost three. Oh, you just got cut off. Okay, so that's a really bad day for you. Goodbye. That's the best I could have done that. But over here, in a more serious note, we have a very dangerous war going on, as in this region, we have China making a large advancement, also taking this major city over here, by cutting off also the old capital city. So it was definitely a good move that they decided to change it over here. Although there is essentially no stopping the Chinese, as they are the second most powerful country in the world. Well, honestly, seeing that Rome, I mean, they did come back, but still, I would put China actually as number one right now. And with an absolutely gigantic army, they are essentially just going to keep marching into these regions with little to no issue. And with that, we have South China slowly losing more and more ground to where it actually becomes a large threat, as the Chinese are not really worried about these other fronts, as if they could knock out South China, that is going to gravely help them in this entire war. And in a matter of like maybe a year or even less, we have South China getting crippled to this region over here, where it is genuinely really bad. But as it is getting worse, we see them cut this region into two, and the massive army is just essentially not stopping. And as it is getting worse, we even see them begin to encircle the capital region, and as this siege is going on, we also see this portion over here begin to get completely wiped out from the face of the earth, where we even have the rest of South China essentially falling, or at least the core territories of it. As all that is left is the capital city, which as a matter of fact will get completely taken over. And as sad as this is, just note, this is not the end of South China, because they have a whole colonial empire over here. So they will make a new base of operations with also a brand new capital, right smack down in the Philippines. That's right, they are not giving up in this war. They are going to keep fighting on and on, me just essentially being a pain in the ass to China every now and then. And obviously, China cannot invade South China, as even with the entire coast gone, they still have the superior navy. So essentially, they just have to deal with this the entire time. That's gonna sound great now, doesn't it? So while they did lose one of the most industrial regions in the entire world, also for the entire Trapezoid Alliance, they are still going to prevail to some degree, just not much, along with a few small military invasions every now and then, popping up in a few new regions like so. Over here, we are gonna have something quite interesting happen, as seeing over here also just in general in Crimea, I kind of forgot to do this part, but essentially they are going to get pushed back to this small region over here, along with them starting another offensive essentially in Romania, where there is just literally no stopping the Mongol army, as they have essentially been able to advance much technologically, which they were somewhat lacking, but thanks to the blue team essentially being the only reason they did, because the deal was essentially, we joined a war, you give us your technology. And seeing that they were definitely desperate, they kind of had to do it, and it was for very great aid for both sides, as Rome will not die, and they just became much more technologically advanced with the single largest army in the entire world. Boy, I don't see how that could go wrong in the slightest. But anyway, over here in this region, as most of the military was defending this front line, it is essentially going to allow the Russians to finally push back in this region and begin the absolute crippling of Romania, as they are about to have a grave end, where they are also going to completely collapse. Oh yeah, and Crimea is still holding up. They are just let me just point out, they are like blowing up bridges left and right to keep them out of this region. Like, it is insane. Like, no advancements have been able to be made, also because, like, these guys just don't have a navy, like, at all. So while they've tried reusing a few, it's essentially just been a bunch of broken ships that they've already blown up. So essentially, it's going to be very difficult to try to invade the actual section of Crimea. Looking back into this region, we also see the Egyptian... that my brain just broke. Stop. Over here, we do finally see the collapse of this small nation over here. And we see the one thing that this Turkish country was really hoping would not happen. And that would have been the Egyptian army marching their way towards this region over here. And I think you know how this is going to go, as from all sides they begin marching their army. And again, this is because they have no threat in this region, so they could let go parts of their military to refocus in this region, which is absolutely terrible, seeing that there is no other country willing to join this war, as essentially it's already gotten bad enough. And over here, this definitely gives some breathing space to the southern Turkish country, where they are able to push back in these few regions, almost entirely liberating their entire country. Along with working over here, they are able to work together like so, and push back the country gravely. Over here in Europe, we finally have the Romans coming up with a brand new plan, as essentially they also have to figure out a way, if they do win this war, how do they not stop their country from collapsing? Because, I mean, look how bad it is. Their country is potentially nearing the verge of collapse in a few regions, but they are still holding strong. But I mean, at this point, so are a lot of other countries. Just this war is extremely devastating, so most countries are already close to tapping out. And one of those countries is France, as the French military has officially collapsed, as they've been trying to hold on in so many regions. They've lost all money to pay them. The people in the country are upset for betraying their closest ally, and officially they are about to collapse entirely, which all of the countries start scrambling around to start to sweep as much areas as possible. As for example, we also have the Dutch and the Germanics take a bunch of lands in this region over here, as well as the Romans rushing towards this southern part, sweeping through who knows how many regions over here, along with it looking something like this, where we also have the final collapse of the French, one of the most powerful countries in the entire world. And what may happen to the colonies, you may ask? To that, I say people have absolutely no clue, as the French government doesn't officially die. They are still running in their colonial holdings. Specifically, the main base of operations is over here in the French colony, but they are somehow still successfully controlling these two other regions over here. So how the hell they're doing it? Honestly, I don't know. But the colonial holdings are surprisingly still well stuck together. But due to this absolute crippling, the French, as a matter of fact, will go ahead and fully leave the war, as they just cannot afford to keep fighting. And with the French out of this war, the blue team can now finally, go focus on the other front that they were trying to work on, being the red teams. But they were also waiting for this as so they could finally execute their main plan. And that was going to be the fully combined invasion of all the countries in this war working together, as the red team's high nationalism and still powerful economy was not going to be easy to take over. But essentially, here's how the process is going to look. We are going to see the Romans successfully begin to liberate the country that at this point probably doesn't even work functionally anymore, and they are going to successfully regain these regions over here, and along with through the military of the Romans just simply crossing through the country, they are successfully able to take many regions in these areas. What? That did not make sense. But anyway, we also have them making their way down the coast, nearing the main capital of the entire country, and seeing how bad this is getting, how about we take a look at all the other fronts. Over here in the south, 2 more major cities are going to be taken, along with a third one in this northern region over here. Over here, the Russians will make a separate military invasion over here, as they will take 2 major cities like this. The Germans will completely push them out of the region, as well as fully reliberating their ally. And they are going to fully push into 2 more major cities over here, successfully cutting them off from all coastal access in the north. As this is all the Germanics, just to point out, they are just working together essentially. Over here, we also have the second Germanic state pushing into these regions over here, creating a separate front like so. And essentially, we have the full collapse of the red team. And this is essentially the worst it has ever been, as through the final sweep of the 80-day siege of the capital, we finally see the surrender of the red team. And this is probably the single largest swift change in the entire war. As with this, many countries realize they do not have a chance in this, and they are probably going to lose. And so before it is too late, we see countries like Crete, we see countries like Crete leave the war, as they somehow got a lot in this, and they are probably going to get a lot of this in return, as well as Finland and Estonia, as well as Crimea striking a deal with, I guess, the Mongolians. I forgot their name for a second, along with the rest of their alliance, or at least what's left of it. And essentially, this is going to cripple all of Europe in this region, where there is essentially no more Diamond Alliance in existence, as all of these regions, including Portugal, striking a separate deal in hopes of trying not to absolutely die, as if they do, they're gone for good, okay? They are never going to come back, seeing how far they've come in history. And with this essentially happening, we are going to see essentially the complete collapse of the Diamond Alliance, as in Europe, no country is left in this alliance, and everyone else is starting to question whether they should stay in it or not. First of all, we have Northern China leave, essentially for the pleading of their life, as well as many other small nations over here, which are all going to leave so they do not die. For example, this one has not had any land taken from it, and they find that a blessing, so they are going to leave. This country has collapsed, as well as this one. So the only countries left are China. I guess they're a little puppet state, a quote-unquote puppet state. Caspia, Egypt, they're also quote-unquote puppet state, and their allies. Although one thing that we do see happening is Yemen, probably their oldest and closest ally, actually leaving the alliance on their own accord, which definitely angers Egypt, but they can't really do anything about that. But also with that happening, many countries do not see the further purpose of this alliance, so they end up leaving. For example, we have the yellow team, which leaves, London, which also leaves. All of the Germanics will leave this alliance as well. Well, these two, they collapsed. These regions here will leave, as they will strike a separate deal, or at least they will try to strike a separate deal with the Egyptians. this country will actually go ahead and surrender to Egypt so they could preserve parts of their country. These three, after getting what they wanted over here in the Punjab region, they are also going to leave. And with that, the First World War would normally come to an end. But this is not like any normal war, as it is technically still in action, as we see many countries still in this war just gravely shrunken down, as Europe doesn't have any more trapezoid members, and they are all the rest of them are just in Asia, actually, now that I look at this. Oh, also India leaves. And so at this point, the rest of the world is going to try to strike a deal. For example, one region that is definitely not going to be solved for a while is over here in Asia. As this region, most of this morale is completely lost from the Chinese military, and we begin to see large pushes emerge from this region, along with a lot of help from Korea over here in this region. Oh yeah, I forgot, you surrendered. But also this is because they have, as we even see Korea start making a few minor pushes in the region, which over the years is going to allow one of the final fronts to begin collapsing, as the Chinese are going to see these issues. And once they're even fully pushed out here, with essentially the entire world beginning to back this region, we are going to see them make a small counteroffensive in this region, and even start pushing up this northern front, where we finally see China agreeing with a separate deal in return for their existence, as they do not want to be fully crippled. So with that, we have this region also finally leaving this war, and that is going to conclude the full Asian theater over here in this region, being one of the most devastating wars that have occurred. We also see Russia finally leave, as they do not see any more purposes to this. Over here, I have kept these two in the alliance, mostly because they have some more fighting with each other, although it does eventually come to a faster end than actually expected, as after some large pushes occur, Caspia will strike a deal to simply just keep these small lands, and they just beg for their lives if they get to keep this, and, maybe they could lose some land, but no, absolutely not. You thought they were going to let them live. Absolutely not. Once they get to around here, Caspia is going to plead for their life and go ahead and surrender. Kind of an ironic death, but, stuff happens. And that is also going to conclude this front over here, where we have, where we have these countries leaving this war, and all that is left is the blue team and the Egyptians. These two have also begun bringing each other a brand new hatred, and the only issue now is that these two are not leaving each other alone, as there's constant naval battles in the region affecting many other countries, as these two are not backing down. And as a matter of fact, they continue fighting this war, as through a lot of Egypt's military just being put as the Libyan color, just to make more sense essentially, we see the Romans keep losing more and more land. And now originally, it would make sense if Egypt would have a terrible fate for what they have done in this war, some not very nice things to point out. But the problem is, everyone else has already left, as everyone's country is basically on the verge of death. Besides Egypt's, of course, as they haven't honestly done that much in the war besides take over some Byzantine states, which forces the Romans to strike a deal with Egypt in return for their essentially, them not dying, is my best description of this. So we have this war also concluded in this region, which, as a matter of fact, after these countries leave, marks the entire conclusion of World War I. So now, we can take a look at one of the largest peace treaties, actually no, scratch that, the largest peace treaty in history. So remember what the old map used to look like before the war started, roughly something like this, because let's just say it is about to gravely change. And after like an hour of just thinking and everything, oh my god, we finally have finished the peace treaty of World War I. So I think it's time we go ahead and break it down. Firstly, over here in this region, two main things happened. Because as we know previously, the purple team had all of these lands under its control. But essentially what happened is they gave independence back to this orange country, which if we remember used to look something like this, but now they are back with independence, except half of it is cut off as it is going to go to the blue team, and this portion, which actually has nothing to do with historic values, I think, or no, it did. It used to be a part of the blue team, as we can see by their religion, and now it is going to go back to the blue team. This region, this small portion over here, just for war reparations, is going to be given to this small nation over here, along with this small portion over here, just to make that look a little better. So they are going to be a little crippled. But I also want to talk about what the official deal was. Because as we remember, the purple team was not in the best of situations, but they weren't that bad either, because if we remember, they had a large chunk of the colonial area of the blue team under its control. So in return, here's what would happen. They would re-give independence of this region to this small micro island country over here, because as we remember back in like episode 14ish 13, it used to look something like this, but over the episodes it got conquered and it essentially was erased from reality. But now that it has returned, the other thing to mention is that France doesn't have a colony, but we'll get to that later, because if we take a look at France, they got crippled. So sorry any of the French lovers. First of all, this region over here, all of this is going to the blue team, as they also gain value over here in the ocean. So now they don't have to go through this strait, and instead they could simply just go through here. So luckily for them, they get all of that. Over here, we have two brand new countries emerging from France. The first one being this green one right here, and the second one being this. So those two being independent, and of course we have to give them their capital city, we mustn't forget. With this one is going to have its capital right over here, and this pink one is going to have its capital right over here. And now obviously we have the England is going to successfully take this region over here. And actually, to make this look genuinely a little better, it's going to be slightly tweaked as the treaties go on. This region I'm actually going to give over to this brand new French country. Okay, there we go. That looks better. Yes. Okay. So we have it roughly looking something like this. And of course, the Dutch are almost going to double in size, as they are going to gain that entire area over here, even more than what they originally had, as they were really fighting to get a lot of land in this war, which I guess ended up working, as now they have all of this land. So good job. Over here, we also have the second Germanic country is going to split this small region over here and give it to themselves. And looking at this is what France looks like right now. And this is essentially what they looked like at their peak, so, kind of fell off. Just a bit, though. Wait, are they smaller than the Dutch now? Oh my god, they are smaller than the Dutch now. That is sad. Okay, in that case, the elephant in the room. The red team, one of the most powerful countries in the world, have now become very, very weak. First of all, this tire part over here is going to get fully annexed, just like so. So they get shrunken down there, except they also get shrunken down by the orange team as they take these two regions. Not sure why that's there. And you know what, just for this, we have to give them a new capital, as the most ancient capital in all of history does not exist anymore. So now they have to move it to this central region over here. And seeing how much they lost, oh my god. First of all, we also have the white team, which broke away at the same time, obviously, as the Germanic one. They're just obviously a lot weaker, and they fall under the full influence of the Romans, which at this point are like almost the sole superpower of They are the sole superpower of Western Europe. No one else competes with them in this region, besides like Egypt, but that's in Africa. But it's only Eastern Europe that's a lot more competitive, but we'll get to that in a minute. And obviously, with this crippling, wait, are they smaller than the? Oh, they're smaller than the orange team, aren't they? Wow, they are smaller than the orange team. Okay, anyway, I'm getting distracted. Over here, we have the blue team taking this small region over here. And the Germanics, after doing a lot of talking, were successfully able to get this entire region. This is bigger than them, isn't it? Okay, so, okay, it's practically the same. They basically double in size originally. And for doing nothing, Kaliningrad is successfully able to take this small region over here for themselves. We have this like cyanish white country over here have this northern portion. The biggest one of them all, obviously besides like the main red team, is this one over here. And of course, in this eastern side, we have this one over here. Oh, almost forgot. There's another small one that is spat out over here. And of course, we have to give them some good old capitals. And just like that, they all have brand new oh, I forgot about you. Now they all have capitals. There we go. Moving down south a little bit, all we're going to focus on is first of all Europe, so we'll go a little like continent by continent. Oh, I almost forgot. This region, these two little city-states are going to get annexed by the orange team, while the white team is going to annex these two regions as they grow in size significantly and aren't even really that small. They started off small and they grew in size significantly, so good job to them. But over here down south, essentially what we have is Crete growing in size significantly as they were able to fully secure these two regions, even surprisingly from the blue team, and they grow their country, and I guess they restore a lot of, I mean, this is what Greece used to look like back in like episode 1. So they essentially just restored episode 1 like Greece, because at the time it wasn't even the Byzantines yet. So moving our way up north, we also have the Russians, which are going to gain land over here, as well as a large part down here, where they become quite a long country. But as a matter of fact, they actually lose a little bit of land to Estonia right over here, as well as a small portion to the Finnish in these two regions. And I just forgot that they get to take a small portion of Crimea right over here. So they get to look something like so. And the Mongols, which technically took over all of these three countries practically, don't get that much land as they only secure these two areas, which I mean is still a lot. They still get a bunch of land. So in the end, it will look something like this. And with that, that basically finishes Europe, as a matter of fact, with all that we have to do is give the Egyptians their old land back as they regain this canal over here, but they actually gain a little more as they are going to annex this region over here a little more than what they used to have as, like, I guess, a punishment for this country joining. Although I think they already have a big enough punishment, seeing that the south, wow, they gain a lot of land. Essentially, all of this was like cut between these two countries, but now, nope, now it's all of that. And looking over here, I think it's interesting to mention, as some people may have thought Egypt would have had the worst fate. And that's what everyone did think, until we realized how resilient Egypt is and how essentially this war concluded, as for a long time they kept those little secrets, these secrets, quite quiet for a while, so people were unaware of what happened. And since they gained so much land over here in the African regions, they were successfully able to take a lot of land from the Romans. Although I think the Romans could live with this, seeing they gained much more valuable lands in other regions. And looking over here, they also are going to fully annex this country over here and take a large chunk out of this one, showing how much they've grown in size and that there is essentially no stopping the Egyptians. They're absolutely terrifying. If we go right up north, we have the old breakaway state of whatever this country is. I always forget the name. I guess like the Caucasus country, but point is they are going to annex a bunch of lands over here, so they grow in size quite a bit. Seeing that we are moving back to the Mongols, they are going to annex the entire northern region of Caspia. Like, first of all, it's kind of like a thing where they like, Caspia looks like this, they take a chunk, and then Caspia looks like this, and then they take a chunk, and it's like over and over. That's kind of horrifying. But anyway, we need to give them a new capital, as Caspia is just sadly getting weaker and weaker. So their new capital is going to be placed over here now. Their old capital does not exist anymore. Looking over here, we have the Punjab country, which sadly just got completely folded out of existence. The first thing before I forget is give this country a capital, which it will, that's major cities, which is going to be right over here. And of course, we have to give them their main land, as this was essentially a split to weaken the Punjab country as much as humanly possible. And with this, we have the green team taking a lot of land, the most actually out of anyone here besides the green team, which obviously, seeing that Purse India it's more India, I just call it Purse India because 8 is, but Purse India obviously is a superpower, so they got a bunch of land, and I just realized that is the single most disgusting border, so nice one, guys. Really couldn't just get someone else to take it, but no, they had to take it for themselves. And of course, the pink team will take this. And then we have finally India taking this portion, leaving this country very, very crippled. Why do these borders look like this? Anyway, I can't get over it. I can't get over Caspia. It looks so funky. I hate it. Okay, anyway, looking over here, surprisingly, even though they got fully cooked under the pressure and everything, this small country only loses this region over here. So they got off the hook very easily. Over here, even though this country did lose the war, they actually ended up gaining quite a bit of land, as technically they didn't really lose anything as a matter of fact, so they were able to secure a bunch of areas over here, which they were able to successfully fully annex, with little to no issue, essentially shrinking some of the gold team's allies, which they aren't too happy about, but they have to live with it. Over here, we have this region over here getting annexed by the gold team, as well as this one, and of course from northern China. So essentially we have this country growing in size massively. Over here we also have Korea, which finally got their full revenge on their enemy, which they will fully annex all of these regions, which, you know, now most of their country is part of the Chinese religion. They could get that sorted out later. They should be fine. And as usual, they have to move their capital, which is going to be right down south over here, completely switching up the country's shapes, making it look vastly different, and questioning my life choices on these borders. And with that, we have this region completed, looking like this, and absolutely disgusting. Over here, we have South China. After successfully winning their war, sadly don't gain all the land that they were hoping for, but they annex all of these regions, making them absolutely gigantic. Also, I forgot to get rid of your capital in the Philippines. And the other thing that we do see is China is forced to spit out a country right down south over here, which is going to gain its independence, roughly looking something like this, trying to weaken China as much as possible. And also for doing absolutely nothing, we also see that Bangladesh gets a large chunk over here. Vietnam. What an interesting place to look at. First of all, you are going to get absolutely crippled in this war, as you are going to get like 50 times smaller. As I guess Vietnam just has one of the worst fates, it seems. But also, we obviously have... What? No, you don't want to annex that. We have China annexing this. And as a matter of fact, they are also split into two, with their green western counterpart right over here. With, of course, their magnificent capital, which is going to be right down in the south over here. And of course, since they did actually have a colonial empire, it is going to be actually split as much as the Chinese wanted to. It is going to be split between Thailand and actually the Dutch, as the other half of this area will be handed over to them. And they actually surprisingly get only a small piece, as they are, I guess, able to unite Borneo. Borneo. I think that should be how you say it, right? I think I'm getting like way too distracted. But in the end, this is what this region is going to look like. And all that is left now to take a look at is simply Africa. As the Dutch take over this region, we also have London, or I guess England I should actually be calling it, taking this portion over here. The Germanics will successfully able to take a small portion over here. And last but not least, oh no, there's two. We have the blue team taking this. And I just remembered we have the Portuguese surprisingly taking this. So in the end, this is what it is going to look like, because obviously, as we know, they can't, the French are unable to support a colony, seeing that they have become absolutely crippled, so they lack all capability of that. Oh yeah, I forgot, they also had the other colony, so this, we could say goodbye to with little to no issue, because that is going to cease to exist. And one thing I did forget to mention is that Madagascar actually was able to make an agreement with China to not invade their entire colony in return for this piece of land, which went successfully. And with that, we've checked out everything on the list besides Oceania. It seems whenever I say we're done, but we're not. We obviously have this region over here going on over to the blue team. We have this northern old portion over here being handed over to the Chinese, and this southern one for doing absolutely nothing. They get this entire region, so good job, Australia. And don't worry, I swear this is it, okay? This is the last thing we're doing. Over here, if you guys remember, there used to be a small blue country, a natives one to be specific, but a while back, they got completely invaded, and then they ceased to exist from the French colonial empire. But seeing that the French colonial empire now does not exist, they are all getting independence, and these regions, since they can't really get sustained, are now going to be split up between these regions. And with that, seeing that everything is finished, hopefully you guys enjoyed this video, and this definitely took a long time. And now that a world war has finished, we are going to be seeing new powers begin to unfold and a new dynamic being shown on the world stage. So if you guys want to see the newest episodes that we'll be releasing and how everything does end up unfolding, I would recommend subscribing. So with that, I will go ahead and see you on the next one.